Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from OurSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Tuesday, December 10th, and we are headlong into looking at Notre Dame's matchup against Indiana in the first round of the college football playoff to be played in South Bend on December 10th, or excuse me, December 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, broadcast by ESPN. That's kind of fun that ESPN's going to do the game in Notre Dame Stadium. I didn't think about that until today, but that's a fun little wrinkle to this whole thing.
I think that's super
ESPN's going to
fun.
close it.
I
Yeah, I
love
think that's
that.
cool.
Yeah. Just
I think
like
that's
guys
cool.
like McElroy
McDonough.
and McDonough. I bet Sean McDonough, who's to my opinion, the best play-by-play college football guy out there. And I've been a huge fan of his for years. Like I remember he did like the Blue Jays World Series back in the the early 90s. I don't. He's never called the game at Notre Dame Stadium.
No,
So
this is the first home game This is the first non NBC home game since 1991. Ironically, and a lot of people have pointed this out. The first NBC home game ever was against Indiana in 1991. It's the famous Irv Smith game where he carried Indiana players. That's kind of a fun wrinkle to this whole thing. And so we're going to, talk about all those things. We'll talk about the coaching matchup a little bit. I'm curious to get your thoughts on Marcus Freeman and, obviously his first foray into the playoff world, be it, the 12 team or the 4 team or whatever it might be. So that'll be interesting to talk about. We'll talk about some portal stuff, what you think Notre Dame's looking for in that, and some things that are going on in the chat as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you like what you hear, please hit the like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. So whatever it is, we are going to go live. Links to the podcast, as always, are in the description below. And as we've mentioned on a couple of shows now, ESQ Clothing is running their Christmas special. Ge Wang is so fired up for the college football playoff. He decided to extend another sale to ISD customers. Use code ISD at esqclothing.com for 25% off all online items. So it was a 49% off for Black Friday. It is now 25% off on all online items on esqclothing.com. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. You see it on the player walk. Former players are getting married in this stuff, right? So it's not so much that ESQ is outfitting the Notre Dame football team. Once they leave the team, they still want to wear ESQ. You get married in their stuff, that's quality. So go to esqclothing.com one more time. ISD, use code ISD for 25% off. Jamie in the chat, everyone's talking about uniforms, alternate unis. Here's a take just off the cuff here. I don't think it's fair to call them alternate unis anymore because Marcus Freeman has been so willing to go against, the normal kind of just, blue and gold or white and gold on the road, blue and gold at home. Like they've changed it up several times for a number of games. So I don't think they're alternate so much as just breaking the norm. Do you think Notre Dame should A, do that, and B, if they break the norm? I think for me, I think that if they were going to, I say going green for the playoffs specifically is like the way to go in the playoff era. It's like, you want to wear green, make the playoffs and we'll put on green.
Ooh, I like that.
I think green on green would be really good for this game. And I think Notre Dame should do that. It's like, we're wearing green in the playoffs. That's the deal. That's how.
Man, you know what? I think that's a great call, Greg. And I would say, because I was leaning I just think I just like the blue and gold, like for home games. I like kind of switching it up and doing white on white for some of the away games and stuff. Like I love that, right? Like I think that's cool, but I like having the traditional blue and gold for home games. It is one of those things, like you have an iconic kind of like uniform combo, with the gold helmets. So I don't kind of messing with the good thing in a lot of ways, but I do like that idea of being like, hey, we're in the playoffs. We wear green because it's go time or whatever you want to call it. Whatever.
Switch. Like you're kind of flipping a switch. Like this is different. We're putting on our green jerseys. These are, because Dabo has the championship pants. that they wear. They have the
Yeah.
orange pants. Like
Yeah.
these are playoff unis. We're wearing
Yeah.
green for the playoffs, right? Whether it's white on white, or green numbers, or white on green pants, or whatever it might be. Like I think that's how I would do it if I was going to make a change at all. That's what I would do. Curious to see what people think about that in the chat. We got a question here from Adam Dowling. Is Indiana's defense really as good as we are hearing? So they have a very good defense, statistically anyway. And they've done some good things. I have to say though, Jamie, I was looking at it. I think the best offense by F+ that they've played is beyond Ohio State, which is obviously very high. But after Ohio State, the best offense they played, I think, is Nebraska. And I want to say they're 64th in F+. I'd have to go check that. I don't have that specifically, but it's kind of one of those things. Like, they do have good defensive numbers. They have very good defensive numbers, especially against the run. And by the way, they were good against the run against Michigan, a good running team, and Ohio State, a good running team. So, but they haven't played a ton of good offenses, right? So that I think that is a factor. So
they haven't actually. It's funny that you brought that up, because I actually looked at that up before. They haven't played. That was Ohio State, which is third. Plus that they haven't played a team in the top 60. So no offenses in the top 60. So nothing above an average offense the whole year. So I mean, you give credit, their defense has played really well, and you only play the opponents you play and all that, and they've been very good. Like, they have a really high havoc rate. I believe 21.2% havoc rate. That's they're 16th in TFLs per game. They do a lot of stuff with like blitzing and just a lot of like games up front that they do. They have like all Big Ten level players at all three levels of the defense, right? Like, and three of those guys are from, James Madison that they brought in, that are like legit dudes, right? So,
people understand, Cignetti is from James Madison, so he brought his own players. So not everyone may realize that. So these are known players to him specifically. Please.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's something that, like, I think maybe people don't realize that, like, they do have more talent than a typical Indiana defense, I would say. And, they have that. I would say where they don't have is like the depth, right? They don't have the depth if a couple guys were to go down, they've been pretty healthy for most of the year. Yeah. If a couple key guys go down, it's going to be a significant drop off because they haven't recruited at that level, right? And then, they can only bring so many guys from James Madison that are studs, right? So, I think how they've performed this year is, they performed really well, right? Like, they're really good, awesome rush defense. They're third in rushing success rate. But, they haven't really played the best rushing offense. They did a pretty good job against Ohio State. That's for sure. And Michigan, which is above average, I would say, as a unit in terms of like their rushing unit, I would say that they're there. But one thing to remember, they also played Ohio State after they had lost their starting left tackle and their starting center for the season. And that was the first game where they played without the starting center, right? So that is something to take note of, that they, weren't playing the best version of that. And obviously Michigan is so one-dimensional with what they can do on offense that it's a little bit different. And Notre Dame has a better rushing attack than both those teams. They do. They're first in, EPA per rush, right? So there's that to kind of think about. But at the same time, they probably overcommitted to the run against Ohio State, and like Will Howard 8 in that game. He's like over 8% completion percentage. They cooked them. They cooked them in the secondary, right? So I think that is something that Notre Dame doesn't have the same level of athletes that Ohio State has outside, but they certainly have good athletes and guys that can, present problems. So they're 15th in DF plus. I would say that's it's appropriate. They're a top 20 level defense. They just haven't been tested all that much, right? So, Notre Dame is 7th in OF plus. It's going to be the best offense they face outside of Ohio State, like we said. So it's a different level that they haven't faced, and it's also on the road, so they're not getting the benefit of that either.
Yeah. So I think their defense is probably, like, just looking at their numbers, like, they're probably, at 15th at DF plus. Like, that's probably, like, that's, I think, about right. I think that tells the story. Like, they've had a good defense. And to your point, though, and we talked about this, Notre Dame, I think, has the best rushing attack in the playoffs. Penn State was obviously very impressive against Oregon, so I take heed of that. I just think Riley Leonard's a different kind of threat than Drew Aller is.
Yeah, he is.
I just think a lot of, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price as well. I think the thing that I kind of get side eye about is just looking at the numbers is Indiana's offense at 4, just because, like, again, haven't played the best offenses, haven't played the best defenses, and then they did against Michigan and Ohio State, and it was ugly. It was not anywhere near where it was like the 4th best offense in the country. When you're talking about the quarterback Rourke threw for 68 yards against Ohio State, like in a game like that to me is kind of like, man, there's a lot, like, so they're 9th overall in F plus, but like that has a lot to do with their offense. And it's just like, when you play those defenses, it didn't look anything close. They had how many yards did they have in the second half against Michigan? I mean, they won 20-15. I mean,
they had 18 yards.
18 yards in the second half against Michigan. I mean, it's a good defense. You didn't have Will Johnson in that game, and you want to throw the ball. I don't know. That's the one where I get kind of side eye about their.
Yeah, and they also had 2 good drives against Ohio State, and one was like kind of when the game was over.
Yeah, it was 38-7.
And in between they had 6 yards, like total from all the drives in between. So, which is very much a kind of game that a lot of teams have had. A lot of offenses have had that kind of game against Notre Dame's defense.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of teams have, right? I do think, they got good wide receivers. They have some talent there. They got some speed. They got speed in the backfield. They lost their starting left guard for the season in November. I think that has probably been one of the reasons why, not just the fact that they've played better defenses, in Michigan and Ohio State, but that's one of the reasons why, they've dipped in terms of like what they've done. And also, what they've done in terms of like sack rate. Like you mentioned that, 2.46, yards per play against Ohio State in that game. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like I'm not saying that they're going to get 2.46 yards per play against Notre Dame, but I don't think, like, you just see them when they're going against a defense of that caliber, which I would say, Notre Dame's pretty close at the very least. 2.56, sorry.
Yeah.
Not 2.46, but Notre Dame is the best defense they faced since Ohio State, and I would say is right there with Ohio State. Maybe doesn't have the straight up pass rush, the edge guys that they have, but outside of that, I'd say they're better, in some areas too. And I just think that, Rourke got sacked 9 times versus Ohio State and Michigan. He's been sacked 11 times in the last 3 games. So they haven't been giving up a ton of pressures and sacks early on, but in the last 3 games, 12.5% sack rate, that's 124th in the country, and Rourke has had some problems protecting the football. He hasn't been as accurate. He's tops in the country in terms of his passer rating, both his NFL passer rating and the college passer rating. He's had a really good year, big numbers, 27 touchdowns against 4 picks, 9.9 yards per attempt. That's awesome, right? Like, you're not going to deny he's a good player. He's probably going to be, a late round pick. I think he's got a really good chance at that. But he struggled with his accuracy in tight windows. They've schemed a lot of stuff open, and they've have guys who've been just better and been able to win against certain things. He's been sacked 11 times in the last 3 games. 50% of the pressures have turned into sacks in the last 3 games.
Yeesh.
I mean, if that happens against Notre Dame, they have no chance. Yeah. 0 chance. They're getting blown out. They're getting blown out. So, he's not a guy who, sometimes smartly, he's not a guy who is going to force the ball in when he doesn't see it. But if you're not escaping that pressure, you're not getting away, that's,
right. Like, I mean, that was the part of, that's what helped USC as much. Like, Notre Dame pressured them, Mayava, he threw well under pressure, right? There were moments when it was like, he was escaping pressure. He was getting the ball out ahead of pressure. And look, if Rourke can do that, then they could have success, right? I think people, regardless of what you think of,
he's going to make some of those plays for sure. Yeah.
They got to make those plays. They just do, right? And that's the difficulty. Now, look, they made the plays, USC did. But, like, again, they also got burned on those kind of plays, right? Like there is a give and take there. There is the other side of the coin. There's a conversation going on in the chat about how big a win this would be for Notre Dame, and if it would be the biggest win of Marcus Freeman's career. I'm going to kind of segue this into another conversation I wanted to have about the coaches, but I think it's without question. This is the playoffs. Like, this is an 11-1 team, regardless of how good or not good someone thinks that Indiana team. This is an 11-1 team. They are ranked, I think it is 8th in the rankings and 10th by seed because of automatic burst and stuff. It's number 8th ranked team after the season's over, right? It's a playoff game. Like, you want to be national champions. Like, this is the biggest game of Marcus Freeman's career by far. I mean, I know beating Clemson was a big deal. That's a 5-3 Notre Dame team. If Notre Dame loses that game, who cares? If Notre Dame wins that game, I mean, it's great to win, but there's no stakes involved, really. This is for your season. You want to be national champions. This is you're at home. It's the fact that, like, you have to start playing championship football at this point in the season in order to extend. Because I tell you what, man, like, Cignetti, he knows how to get teams ready to play championship football. He's done it before. He hasn't done it at this level, and he hasn't played a team the caliber of Notre Dame. But I guarantee you, I don't want to guarantee anything. I am planning to that Indiana's going to come and play a great football game. That is my expectation. Notre Dame needs to play a great football game.
Oh yeah,
and that
they can't play a B game and win.
Yeah, so this is a huge game for Marcus Freeman, and, like, I think there has been so much made of, like, Marcus Freeman, first time coach. We heard that so many times in 22 and 23. Less so this year. I mean, obviously after NIU, we definitely heard it, but it's like you keep hearing that stuff, and I usually think that's overblown. It's like, well, coaches do that, right? But I think this is a situation where I think the layoff after this regular season and getting ready for the playoffs, I think, is a different type of challenge for a head coach. And it remains to be seen how Marcus Freeman is going to handle it. And I think that is a factor in this game because, like, the season is essentially, the regular season's over. You're almost starting a new season because of the layoff and because of the nature of one loss and you're out. I just think there's a different mental prep. How physical am I during this time? How do I get the guys peaking again for this type of, scenario? how do I treat the injured guys? How do I just mentally kind of help them? Like they've already had their banquet. They've named team MVPs, right? Like there's a finality to that, and like Notre Dame doesn't want a finality to this. So I just think that that's a factor that I think we need to consider that we don't know the answer to. Now, Marcus Freeman has been very good at getting his team ready to play in big games. Very, very good, right? In the opener as well. You know, we had this conversation. Jess Smetana made a great point about it's very similar to the Texas A&M game in a way, right? Notre Dame was ready to play in that game, right? So I'm not questioning whether they'll be ready. It's a factor that we need to consider. So something about. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, before you want to dive into that, I just want to get to the Scott L question.
Yeah.
Because now, okay, we do want to give credit to, and respect Indiana. They are a top 10 team, like you said, top 8, right? Like they're absolutely like a good team. They've dominated teams this year. If you go to ISD today, I have a piece on there talking about these markers that have, champions who won, the college football playoff have done in the last decade. Mm-hmm. And they hit a lot of the markers, right? They hit 5 of the 7, which you wouldn't expect for an Indiana. But, one of the big things they don't is, blue chip ratio. They don't have as many blue chips. They're not there. This team isn't close to Ohio State either of the last 2 years. They're not. Like, CJ Stroud is a better quarterback than Rourke, considerably. And Rourke's a very good player, but CJ Stroud is a different level. He is a different level. A lot of those defensive linemen they played against Ohio State, those are different. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a different level than these guys, right? So that is something that I don't think it's close. You know what I mean? Those 2 Ohio State teams were by far the best teams that Notre Dame has played. And then obviously too, you look at that Ohio State team in 2022, they're a field goal away from, playing for the national championship and probably winning it. Right. So that's just what it was. But I think even last year, not that Kyle McCord was great or anything like that, but he's considering with the totality of the team, that's better. That's a better team. But just because Indiana is not as good as Ohio State doesn't mean they're not very good. Yes, it to kind of like lead into what Greg was saying too, like that's how significant the win would be because it's the playoffs and it is different. I think one of the things though, you should remember that Cignetti, Google it if you haven't, you might as well. I think we're just going to keep saying Google it because the guy is confident for a reason because he has produced, right? He has absolutely produced 11 seasons coaching D2 FCS level, made the playoffs 8 years. Like that's pretty darn good, right? Made the playoffs 8 years, went to, James Madison jumped up to FBS. And so in those 2 years at James Madison and this year at Indiana, forget about who he played, just whatever. He's 30-5. The guy's a winner. He's an absolute winner. He has prepared for these things. He's a good football coach. He's a very good player. There's a reason Indiana never done this before and whatever. It's like, yeah, it's this dude. It's this dude and the staff that he brought with him, and obviously he knows how to identify talent and develop talent and all that too, right? So yeah, they're absolutely a dangerous team. And anyone who takes them lightly is being stupid. At the same time, we're analyzing it and looking at it objectively. They're not as talented in terms of like top end talent, guys that just game records that can just absolutely just like disrupt an entire game for you. I don't think they have like Travion Henderson who could just bounce it and go 60 and then basically like essentially win the game. They don't have that kind of guy, right? So I think there's, and that's the thing about Ohio State. They got like 7 of those guys, right? And so that's the difference between those teams. And I think one thing to look at, though, which I think is actually really important in all this that probably people maybe are overlooking, is that Al Golden, obviously in the NFL for a long time, he coached during long playoff runs with the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Like they had to prepare in like big games often, where they went to the Super Bowl, right? They had to go and like prepare for like Patrick Mahomes this week and this week, like all this kind of stuff. So he's had to go through that gauntlet. Dalen McCullough with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? He's assistant head coach of obviously Notre Dame. That's obviously a guy you can lean on in these kind of situations in terms of like, hey, how did maybe Andy Reid handle this in terms of whatever? Because obviously Andy Reid was probably someone that, he had success early on, but didn't kind of make it through to the finish line until much later in his career. And McCullough was there when he got to the finish line, right? So those are guys I think that are worth leaning on to kind of give insight there. And obviously they're, prominent guys in the staff too. It's not like they were guys who were interns there at those places. So I think that helps. I think the fact that, Mike Denbrock has been a guy who's like coaching the SEC championship game. He's coached in college football playoff, right? He's coached in numerous big games, right? So he's had to go and like prepare for these big games for decades, right? That helps a lot too, right? Where, and it's not to say that some young coach can't come in and like, have some kind of great game plan and totally break through and have this kind of thing. But having those guys, those veteran guys who know like, hey, I've also experienced losses. I've experienced wins in these situations. This is kind of what we need. Hey, maybe we have stuff that we saved for this kind of thing, right? All that. And I think that kind of thing does matter.
Yeah. And like, like I said, there's a track record that Marcus Freeman's done well, right? Like he's prepared his team for big games, right? He has. Here's the other thing too. And like, to be clear, like I'm not saying that I think this is going to be a problem. I'm raising it as a potential, like,
it's a question. Yeah.
Like it is a question that we don't have the answer to. I looked at the USC game like very, very closely, right? So I like to look at game ratings. So I'll look at Notre Dame's first, right? So game ratings are on FEI, and this is our friend Brian Fremeau, Notre Dame professor, puts together this stuff. So basically anything over the game rating is the second from the right. And so anything over 1 is like you're playing a good football game, like you're playing really well, right? You're solid, right? Notre Dame has 10 games of 1.0 or higher, right? They have had 9. They have had 9 straight here, ending the season. Notre Dame's never had more than 5 under Brian Kelly. Like they have Notre Dame is playing so much better than, and this is why I said it was the best team that Notre Dame was sending to LA. Notre Dame is playing so much better throughout the season than the 12 team, the 18 team, and the 20 team, right? They are just playing a better football game. The other part is 1.5 game rating for Notre Dame at USC. I don't care. Notre Dame has played bad USC football teams before. This 2024 USC team was better than the 18 team by far. They were better than the 12 team. And they were backup quarterbacks in 12, not in 18, but they had for the freshman quarterback. Notre Dame, they have never gone to LA and played this way. They have not had a game score over 1 in any of the 12 or the 18 games when they had really good teams. Notre Dame had good teams going into those games. Like Marcus Freeman had them playing well in those games, and it was like a good performance from them. That shows me a lot, right? No, we just have not seen that from Notre Dame teams that have failed in the playoffs previously. And so that is a good like kind of marker in, what to expect from Marcus Freeman. If you look at Indiana's game scores, like they've had some good ones, but you look at the Michigan and you look at the Ohio State ones, and they just stand out because none of those other opponents, they just don't move the needle for you. They just don't, right? Like Nebraska, that's a great performance against Nebraska. It is, right? And it's a 2.7 game score. That they killed it that day, right? I mean, Florida International, whatever, but like Maryland, Northwestern, you don't play great games against those teams. Like, Purdue, that's great. Purdue's awful, right? So I just look at this and it's like, to me, and it was the same is true of USC. Like, it's not that Indiana is bad or whatever, overrated. This is a good Notre Dame football team, Jamie. And, someone had asked Bill Connolly, when is the last time Notre Dame was top 5 on offense and defense in SB Plus? The only times it's ever happened: 1946, 1947, 1966. All national championship years for Notre Dame. Those are the only times. This is a good Notre Dame football team.
I mean, shout out Bill Connolly for pumping in the 1946 numbers. Like, gosh, like, you know what? Like, that's cool. Good. That's awesome. Great job by Bill Connolly for that. Like, but I mean, I think that how, in the piece that I wrote, like, normally Notre Dame doesn't check these boxes. When they were in the playoff in these other times, they didn't. So they really weren't good enough, based on how precedent of how good teams have to be. They weren't good enough. Like, they weren't actually close, they weren't good enough on offense, or they weren't dominating enough, or they didn't have a high enough havoc rate, or they didn't have this, or they didn't have that. Like, they weren't explosive enough, all this kind of stuff, right? All these things that they didn't have in all these other years. And really, they do, so anyways, the boxes that, or markers or whatever you want to call them to be a check. So top 8 in OF plus, 9 of the 10 CFP champions have been ranked in the top 8. Top 15 in DF plus, all 10 were in the top 15. Joe Moore Award semifinalists, 9 out of 10 were Joe Moore Award semifinalists. So check. Notre Dame, 3 for 3 there, right? Top 15 explosive passing plays, no. Didn't make it there. They're actually the least explosive passing offense competing in the field right now. It helps when you have a top 5 explosive running game to kind of counterbalance that. But that, that is something that you would say, because 7 of the 10 CFP champs finished in the top 15 in explosive passing plays, so plays of 20 plus yards. But in saying that, only 4 of the top 12, this year are in the top 15 and finish. And really the only team that is a true contender that's in it is Texas. They're the only one. Yeah. And they have questions at quarterback. So anyway, something to think about. Havoc rate, right? Got to be, 8 of the 10 up that 19.5% havoc rate or higher. Essentially the entire field except for 2 teams are there. Notre Dame is there. Taking out the option teams, because you're playing those teams, it's not like playing a regular game. It's so you eliminate those, they're 19.6%. So they're above where they need to be. Net points per drive. This is something that Notre Dame, just because you haven't been dominant enough. And, Brian Fremeau obviously does a fantastic job with FBI, all this kind of stuff. Go check out his site. It's just fantastic. What a great resource for everything. Net points per drive. Notre Dame is 2nd in the country, right behind Ohio State. 2.19, the highest Notre Dame has ever been was 1.53, right? And no team has, no team who won the college football playoff was above or was below 1.37. So obviously they're up there. Indiana is up there too, because they've beaten the snot out of teams too, right?
Okay.
But Notre Dame is up there. They check that wrong. Blue chip ratio. They're one of the teams that is above 50%, but there are teams that they're also in the teams that are above 60%. Every team that has won a national championship since 2011. Shout out Bud Elliott for finding out the stat. What a cool thing that he found out when he was working at SB Nation. It's now at 247. Since 2011, every team has signed in their 4 classes over 50% blue chips, 4 and 5 stars, right? Yeah. So that has happened for every single one. So basically, SMU, Boise State, Arizona State, Indiana, Tennessee. People maybe didn't know that Tennessee, even though, man, they got all these dudes in the D line, their offense isn't not that good. Maybe the old line, maybe they haven't recruited well enough and all that kind of stuff. They didn't make it. So if they win, they'll be the first exception to 2011. But they're probably not, because they don't check some other boxes too. Right. But it's been since 2016, everybody's above 60%. Notre Dame 67%, right? And if you look at who checks the most boxes, there's 4 teams that check 6 of those 7 boxes: Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Ohio State.
Yeah.
And so those, you'd have to say going into it, those are the top contenders to win it. Could somebody else, it's a different thing. It's a different format, 12 team. Maybe some teams get knocked off and all of that. Right. But, Georgia is not on that. Like, they are actually shockingly underperformed in a lot of these areas. And, Penn State, close, but not on it. Indiana, obviously, they haven't recruited at the level. They're below the mark in explosive passing. Though they are pretty explosive on offense, but they're not quite there. So there's a lot of, teams that are close. And I would say Texas is probably the closest to being at all of them, but their big thing is on offense with the quarterback.
Yeah.
And so they might be switched to Arch Manning and all of a sudden they go, right. And we also don't know if something like that can change, what it is. We don't know, because injuries are going to affect this too. Right. Mm-hmm. But I think we know that Notre Dame has played incredible, that they've played where they have on offense to finish 7th in OF plus at the end of the regular season with the start they had to the year.
Right. People were booing them.
Yes.
They were getting booed off the field at home. And now look at where they're at. The numbers are the numbers. And if you look at the game scores, the only time they've actually been subpar ever is against the MAC teams. Every other team they've played really well. They just have. And I had I had some Louisville, not Louisville, Indiana people chirping in my mentions, and it's Notre Dame couldn't beat NIU. It's look, man, if you think you're getting that version, then you're gonna whoop Notre Dame. Look at recent history. It would say you're not getting that version, and in fact, you're getting a much better version. And if the expectation is you're getting NIU game, then good luck and God bless. It isn't there, and they've just been. The thing is, they've played really, really well, and I think people make the assumption. I say people, I mean people who don't follow Notre Dame. I think they make the assumption that they look at the NIU score and they say Notre Dame stinks. And then they look at their scores since then and they say, well, the teams they're playing, they must be awful. And the fact of the matter is, it's just that. No, that's not it. It's the fact of the matter is Notre Dame is playing really, really well in a way that they have not, even in the 2012 season, even in the 2018 season, even in the 2020 season. They are playing better than they have in all of those years. And it's just, my big thing is I hope that they seize the opportunity with the team that they have. And I really wish that BMO was healthy. I really wish that Boubacar and Jordan Badelho were healthy. I think if they were, I think the path would be, Notre Dame would be one of the favorites, in my opinion.
I think they would be in the top 2 for sure.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. So it's no, look, you brought up the explosiveness, and that we've talked this year about how there's so many college football teams that have the weakness. Notre Dame's weakness is the passing game and their explosive passing game specifically. And I just don't see that there's nothing that
it's not going to change drastically. They're not all of a sudden going to come out and just no.
Yeah, and look, like and you and Mike kind of touched on, like, they don't do it because they haven't, because of the type of running game. In my opinion, if they had it in their bag, they would bring it out, right? Everyone, the thing that everyone wants is an explosive running game, an explosive passing game. No one really wants an explosive running game and a ball control passing game. If you could chuck, you would, and they can't, and they don't, and that's the thing that just concerns me, is like, you just wish they had that gear, and I don't see how they get it. And then
yeah, because right now, obviously I think most people who are regular listeners know that I'm a Steelers fan, but like, I think one of the things too with the Steelers this year, and I actually don't know what their metrics are in terms of explosive passing right now.
I saw a stat, they're like 25% of their passes are 20 plus yards right now, which is incredible. Like 25% of completions. Like, if that was Notre Dame, national champions. 100%.
Yeah, and that has been the thing that has opened up their offense, because Russell Wilson throws the deep ball really well. And they got speed at receiver. Pickens is a stud at, getting those kind of things. Freiermuth can get down the field. They got guys that can do that. And that is something why the Steelers have always been, hey, play good defense, run the ball. They're going to have a winning record, but they're probably going to lose in the playoffs because they can't, you need the reason why they're an actual threat to do something in the playoffs this year is because they have that there. So I think what matters for Notre Dame is they're never going to be what they have. They don't have Jeremiah Smith. They don't have Ryan Williams. They're not getting one of those guys that is going to happen. I think as cool as it would be for Jordan Faison or Jaden Greathouse or, Bo Collins to have a resurrection, you can't anticipate it happening. What they can have, hopefully, is one of those guys has like a game when they need a game. And what they can have too is like Louisville, where they were stuck in the mud for most of that game, couldn't run the football. Obviously, Louisville was just bringing the house. Hey, guess what? Indiana's going to bring the house.
Yeah.
They're absolutely going to blitz the crap out of Notre Dame all the time, because that's how if you think you're going to get overmatched up front, that's what you're going to do. And that's kind of what they do anyways, right? They're trying to disrupt. And so it's going to be important to scheme up the stuff at the right moment. And I think I look at that, what Mike Tenbrock has done a really, really good job of. Look at that USC game. Both of those tight end touchdowns were like right time. Oh, we got it. They knew it, and they went and they got touchdowns off of them, right? So you got to have that kind of stuff. You got to go into hey, that Louisville game, they weren't doing it. The Jaden Harrison, pivot route, turned into a go ball, right? Like that play right there that you set up, the play where they run, they make it looks on awful like that RPO, throwback screen to Jeremiah Love, explosive play touchdown. That was on the same drive. They did nothing in the second half in there, but they got 2 explosive plays, when they needed it on passing. Texas A&M, they got the back shoulder to Bo Collins, right? And I don't know if they're ever going to get that again for Bo Collins, but that's something. So can they get those when they need it because ultimately I think that is going to determine whether or not, they can win these games, because they've never had to, in all this time, they've never had to be in a spot where, man, we're 2 scores down.
Yeah.
And the clock is running and we can't run the ball and we have to throw it and we got to do this. And I mean, no objective Notre Dame fan should have confidence that they're doing, because we haven't seen it
right
from them. So until you see that, it's kind of maybe they make it through without it. They could, but there might be a moment there, and you have to see if they can do it, because they haven't shown it so far. But this is also time where this is where people become heroes. People, you become legends in these moments. So
yeah,
it's gonna be fun.
And look, I mean, the reason they haven't is just that they've played so well, right? Like when you're playing great, you just don't trail in games. So that's one of the reasons. Shout out Tyler from Locked On Irish, Tyler Wojak.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
Thanks for being in the show. Appreciate you, my guy. My guy, been on the show a bunch of times. He was doing the Friday happy hour shows. But yeah, I mean, look, when Notre Dame has had to score. I mean, this is true of USC, right? Like Notre Dame scored, USC matched. Notre Dame come out after halftime, score, USC match. Notre Dame goes down and scores again. Like that's a good example of do we need to get in a shootout? Because we can, we will, And look, obviously USC is a different kind of opponent, right? They're not as good defensively. They're not as good as they haven't been as good as anything as Indiana has this year. So, but it's like they were challenged in that way, and then offense was able to meet it on that front. So, Mike Denbrock has a bag that he can reach into. If you want your media company to reach into a bag and come out with some things that really are going to spice up your social media page or your website or whatever it might be, your highlight reel, then you need to go to VSR Media. Founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh, VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Notre Dame being in the playoffs has kind of tampered down a lot of the portal talk for Notre Dame. Mostly because Marcus Freeman does not want to get involved in players. That's funny. Abel Gaming says, let's talk about the portal. That's what we're doing. He has not. He doesn't want to talk about it. No, I don't know that Notre Dame players have entered. There was like a Gabe Rubio scare yesterday. That was erroneous.
Like they screwed up on 3.
That was erroneous. Yeah, that was a mess up by On 3. So Gabe Rubio is not in the portal, and he's not going to go in the portal. But let's just talk about who you think, not who, but maybe how many or what that Notre Dame needs to be after. I think they need to be after some wideouts. Personally, I'm not very hopeful or optimistic about them finding a difference maker in the portal at wideout. Obviously, they can find players who can help and contribute. But I don't know, like a Jameson Williams type. I don't know that that's coming, and they haven't gotten it, and it hasn't been. I think they probably need a couple. They probably need a couple there. D tackle. I mean, right? A couple D tackles. It just where are things with Boubacar Traore and Jordan Botelho as far as their health? They're coming back, but are they going to be ready to go? Is the question you have to ask yourself. Anything else you're kind of looking at? Maybe you probably need some secondary depth, right? Just because you don't want to just rely on Leonard Moore and Christian Gray next year. Obviously, they're going to be top flight corners, but you want guys behind them. Maybe you want a safety with Xavier Watts leaving, someone to play next to Don Schuler. Maybe you don't know if Luke Talich and Kennedy Urlacher are going to be ready. Anything you're kind of looking at right now?
I would say all those things that you said, I think kind of cover it. Like, obviously they don't need O-line. They're going to be in a very good spot on the offensive line.
Don't need running back.
They don't need running back. They don't need that at all. I think Greg got cut off there, but I'll just keep going. Receiver, definitely. They need receivers. Like, you want to give these guys who are freshmen right now, and you want to give guys like Faison and Greathouse a chance to keep furthering to develop and all that too. But like, they're still at a spot where on the boundary where, Bo Collins is gone. We'll see what happens with Jaden Thomas, whether or not he's going to be around or not. But even then, they haven't seen him as a guy that is going to be, their boundary guy. So you would need somebody on the boundary. So I think a boundary receiver, to go there, I think would be big. I think they need two receivers. I think they need two receivers. Hopefully one boundary guy. I mean, you always want all of them to be explosive, and then another like speed guy. I mean, the ideal kind of guy would have been Singleton, who, went in, Eric Singleton, the Georgia Tech kid, because he can fly. He can really fly. He's like a 10-300 meter guy. Like he can really go. But I mean, already
he's visiting Georgia.
He's already got it's all SEC, team. So he is from Georgia too, I believe. So
yeah,
I mean, you would think that he's probably going to stick around there. I know that Notre Dame, I'm sure, would have been interested in him, but like, also he's an undergrad too. So, you never know if like that was going to.
What year?
He's soft. This was a sophomore year.
Oh,
so he's not close. Yeah, so he wasn't close to graduating. But I mean, he went to Georgia Tech, so you never know. But probably not likely. But that type of guy. I mean, there's not that many guys like him, but like for that kind of guy, like I think of a guy like Silas Bolden, who's on Texas, who's like the fourth receiver on Texas, but he was on Oregon State the year before. He's a really good player. That's a type of guy I think that would be another really good piece for them if they can get that kind of guy. Tight end, I think another tight end, just because of where they're at in terms of, they're going to come back with Raritan and Flanagan. I mean, you feel great about those guys going forward, obviously. And then they have, Jack Larson, coming back too. But you only got one other, Flanagan, who I really, really like. But 4 tight ends, it does feel kind of short, because if you get any kind of injuries, it's like, whoa, it can really be a thing. Because Sherwood, even having like a guy like Sherwood just there as insurance, I think he's done, right? So that's a guy there. So if you could get one other guy to kind of be someone who could be like one of your top 3 tight ends, or compete to be there, I think that would be big, if you could get that. And on defense, I think it's interior defensive line. Ideally, I think you get 2 guys there. If you can they obviously don't need anybody at linebacker. If you can get another edge, obviously anyone would take an elite pass rusher no matter what position he played if that guy wanted to come. But I think more of like a guy that could be like another JJB type. Obviously, it didn't work out, or it hasn't worked out that well with RJ Oben. At this point, he wasn't JJB, but another guy there, I think, just to add more of a pass rush there. It's not to say that I think Bryce Young could take a huge step and be like a stud starter next year for Notre Dame. That could definitely happen, but you still want to have, if you could get just a little bit more competition in the rotation there, I think that would be good if you could. Not a necessity, but would be nice. And then depth at DB. I think you're right. Like you're looking at, because like a possible like nickel guy again. Obviously, they've been fantastic at identifying nickels the last couple of years,
right?
With Harper and Clark. Another nickel type, another body at safety or outside corner. I think just because, where before, if you thought like, I always kind of thought Mickey, even if he played the whole year, he probably was going to go after the year anyways.
Yeah.
So and I'm sure Notre Dame was thinking that same way too, but you just don't want to have these freshmen, even though I really like the freshmen. It's a lot to ask the guys to be
You just
like,
don't.
hey, yeah.
It's just so unknown, and you have to make the decision. Like, if you thought you could get someone after spring who was good, like a Jordan Clark type or whatever, like someone like that, or Clarence Lewis or whatever, then yeah, right. But you don't know what you're getting from Zachary or Golden right away. Just don't, right? So like you have to make the decision now. I don't think you can count on it as much as you might like them. You just can't count on that sort of situation. Obviously, BMO, it's people are talking about BMO. I mean, the only thing with Morrison is like when I see Dane Brugler has him outside his top 50, like say what you want about Dane Brugler or whether he's right or wrong or whatever, like we had this big, not us, the two of us, but like ISD had this big thing in our text chain about it. And like, look, whatever I might think, Dave Brugler is very plugged into the industry and he knows how people feel about these players. And I've seen it a couple of other places too, where like people aren't as high on BMO as you think. Like if Brugler has him outside the top 50, is he really going to be a first round pick? Like,
Brugler,
go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, because Brugler in his latest mock or whatever that he had, and I've seen it too, like, man, there's so many polarizing opinions on so many guys in the class.
Yeah.
And I think the thought was, like, I think you and I would probably agree that the thought was, hey, those three corners that are coming out, Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, and then BMO, those are the three. And it's pretty clear that at least consensus is not there that BMO is that third. Maybe it's because of the hip, right? Could be, right? Could be that, because that's obviously the medical is going to be important for him, right? And let's face it, he's one of those guys that he can go wherever he wants. No way he goes if he leaves, Michael, unless his medical is trash. There's no way he lasts the third round. He will go in the first two rounds if he goes. But the thing is that, like, is he going to be one of these guys who says, hey, you know what? They'll pay me this and I can come back for a year and do it. I mean, it's possible. I would say very unlikely, but
right. I think it's hard to pull a guy back when he's decided.
I think it's yes. And I think he's, as far as I know, he is gone.
Yeah.
Right. So I think people should kind of assume that, because basically, since when you have that kind of freshman year already, it's like in your mind, like I'm 3-0.
Yeah.
I'm 3-0. And that was the same thing with Blake Fisher, right? Which is why, like, Blake Fisher was like, Blake Fisher didn't give it a second thought. They didn't even try to convince him, because they knew, like, it was like, everyone's like, man, they need to just like, bring out the bag for Blake Fisher and get him to stay. He was like, dude, I mean, I paid my first and last month rent, weeks ago. I'm out of here. Like, and you know what? It worked out pretty good for him. He went to the second round. So it doesn't really matter, where he goes in terms of, I mean, obviously helps Notre Dame if he goes in the first round. And I think just based on where his, throw the film on. I just don't think And I know there's things about his game that I think we can both admit in terms of like, he's a little bit smaller as a tackler. To be like a true boundary guy, to go up against, to have to tackle. Like, is this guy going to tackle Derrick Henry running to the bound?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. There's some of these questions about him for sure, right? But no one, if he tests well, no one will throw on the tape, and he will go in the first round if he tests well, because and like including medical and all that too, because watch a guy play play man coverage for almost the whole game and lock up top dudes.
Who has better tape against
Who has better
Jr. than him?
No one.
Like I look again, and this is why I like the top 50 thing. Like wait, Nate Wiggins went in the first round, but Ben Morrison is not. What? The kid from Mississippi State, he went in the top 20, and Ben Morrison's not. Like, yeah, what's going on? Like, what am I being gaslit? Like,
it's a value thing too. Like, because everyone always thinks that, this person will go here. It's like, man, corners. It's
yeah.
They're so valuable.
Yeah,
they're so valuable. There's a reason why Notre Dame's defense took a leap when he at the back half of the 2022 season when he took that leap. And when Cam Hart and him are healthy together, it's like, okay, right? And there's a reason why, like, if Leonard Moore wasn't ready and then they got to play him there, and it's just like Notre Dame's defense would have dropped like a stone, but he is. And like, so extremely valuable.
Yeah. Scott L says Mike Brown has plenty of time to show his chops. This year's a throwaway for him. I expected Notre Dame's wide receivers to play a lot better, come off the line with urgency, catch balls, play hard all the time. This is what I'll say. I think you could look at every position group on the team and say they have gotten better and improved throughout the year, brought more to the team. I don't think that's true of the wide receivers. Now, part of that is injury, right? I think Faison getting hurt was a big deal. And I think something's off with Jaden Thomas physically. That's just my opinion. I think something's been off with him all year. Again, that's my opinion.
I mean, he's been hurt a lot of the last couple of years. So.
Right. And I think Great House had some stuff, but just generally speaking, like, Bo Collins has not been anywhere close to what they thought he could be when the season started, right? You thought after Texas A&M, it's like, all right, this is a guy. This is a dude.
He might be wide receiver 1. Yeah.
50 catches, 800 yards, something like that. That's not even anywhere near that. Chris Mitchell was not anywhere near what they thought. I know, look, I like Chris Mitchell, and I like what he's brought to the team in terms of what they've asked him to do and, what he's been able to do and things like that. And he has a good attitude. He's a good teammate. So I'm not trying to bang on the group per se. I'm just saying, like, man, I feel like everything's stock up and the receivers are just kind of stagnant throughout the way. And I don't want to put too much on Mike Brown or anything really. It's just that I think that's a fact, and it's got to be pointed out, right? Like, I think he's got a lot to prove. The wide receiver recruiting didn't go as well. Now, again, we could talk about Mike Mickens. I wasn't super jazzed up about Mike Mickens in 2021 either. So, and there were reasons for that. And you could say, okay, it was COVID and all this other stuff. Okay. But there's a lot to prove, I think, for Mike Brown coming up in the portal and coming up on the next recruiting class. So that's what I think. Anything else, Jamie, before we head out here?
No. I don't think so. I think we covered a lot, man. This is a good episode.
I think this is a good show. I think we had a good time. We'll be back on Thursday talking about.
Oh, actually, one thing. I just want to, I want to plug. I know whatever we always do. We do hit and hustle. Obviously, we can go again Thursday. We had Power Hour yesterday. Rakes report did with our buddy Chris Wilson. Just recorded that for Christmas giving. Just recorded that. That episode is out right now. If you want to check it out. Good talk with my buddy Chris about Notre Dame versus Indiana, the playoff, the kind of season overview of everything. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, There you go.
Perfect. Check out the Rakes Report. Check out our YouTube channel. Hit the like, subscribe, notification bell. Links to the podcast are in the description below. We'll be back Thursday talking more Notre Dame football, more playoffs. And Jason Z, you are as late as possible. We are ending the show. Maybe we'll do a little mailbag.
Oh yeah.
We would do a mailbag on Thursday. Get the people fired up for that. Watching for the next John Roth. We're Dimes with Dara. We were supposed to record tomorrow, and they moved her practice. And again, this is difficult because she is in Europe. So when things get moved around on her end or on my end, things get really messed up. 9-hour time difference makes it real hard. We're efforting. We got a big game coming up for the ladies against UConn on Saturday. So, but we're efforting on that. So thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you on Thursday. Keep hitting and hustling.